Welcome to Prompt India podcast. I am Saran.
And I am Karthik. Join us in decoding how AI is reshaping India.
Hello and welcome to a brand new conversation on Prompt India. In our education series so far, we've already explored private schools and looked at both government and private universities. But to get the full picture, we have to talk about government schools at the grassroots levels. This is where the foundation of education is built for so many children. And to help us understand this, we are joined by Deepa. Deepa is a research and design lead at Mantra for Change, an organization that works directly with governments to improve public schools. Deepa, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
Deepa, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and tell us more about your role and what you exactly do in your day to day life?
Yeah, of course, we can start with that. So, Saran, as you shared, I work as a research and design lead at a nonprofit called Mantra for Change based out of Bangalore. My organization works with different state governments on improving public schools in India. This can be through very specific educational programs that reach students, but also working with the department on improving their processes, their structures, their governance models as well. I have been in the education space, school education space for over 6 years now. I started my journey in school education as a Teach for India fellow in 2018, and I also hold a master's in education from Azim Premji University. My day to day looks like my role involves a lot of conducting research on educational policies, schemes, and programs that the government rolls out, and trying to look for synergies with that and what our organization can offer. It also involves designing very student specific interventions such as project based learning, activity based learning, student parliament, etc. But how to go about delivering these at scale. When I'm talking scale, thinking of like a statewide program, for example, say Uttar Pradesh. So, how do we deliver student centric programs for, say, 1 lakh schools across the state of UP? So, my work involves thinking through the design and implementation of these. Yeah.
Wow, great to hear that. Really glad to have you with us, Deepa, and I'm sure that you will help us understand the landscape of how the digital technologies and AI is being used in government schools. So absolutely looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, to start off with, since you have also have several years of experience doing this, right? Is there a pet grouse that you have or something that you think people or policymakers always get wrong about education?
So, I think one of the biggest kind of pain points I feel with respect to how technology is being viewed in relation to education is that it looks at it as a teaching tool and a tool as a student input, and not necessarily as a governance tool or as a governance lever as well. Because most of the problems in education as a system lie in the governance of it versus, say, the content or the curriculum or the pedagogy. There are issues in those as well. But if you're particularly talking about technology in relation to education, it's the fact that policies don't necessarily emphasize how they can greatly improve governance. The National Education Policy, the latest one, 2020, it talks a lot about how to use technology as a student input, say, in terms of personalized adaptive learning or the distribution of technological resources such as smart modes or tabs and such, but not necessarily so much in terms of how it can be used for better data governance, better data driven decision making, and such. Technology as an input is also isolated from other factors that actually make it effective. So, in the policy space or in terms of the policy making, what happens is that it's seen as something as a standalone that's expected to lead to better student outcomes, whereas there are many other factors that can actually make it more effective, right? So, if you are distributing something like a tab or a smart board to several thousand schools, you also have to ensure that there is the necessary infrastructure for it. When I'm saying infrastructure, I'm referring to, say, electricity or access to internet. Many areas, remote areas in India don't have that. But schools present there do have like a smart board or something, and it's not really used because the infrastructure doesn't support it. Certain other things that need to be thought of are also like, what is the teacher to student ratio? So if you put a smart board in a classroom with, say, one teacher to 100 students, it's not really effective. Like
Yep.
most of the students sitting in the class can't even see what's happening on the smart board, right? And the other thing is teacher capacity. So if you're introducing technological tools, what is being done in terms of improving the teacher capacity, teacher capability of using these and leveraging these to supplement their teaching processes rather than this itself becoming the teacher in the classroom. So these are some kind of pain points and issues that I personally have with how technology is viewed in relation to education.
Those are very pertinent points. And I think you've touched on a very important part that, how technology should not be viewed as only a learning tool, which is important. But how do you really make sure that the resources themselves that are made available are used to the best potential and best way possible? So you've been in this space for some time now. So
Hmm.
have you seen that change happening, evolution happening with the advent of Gen AI particularly? Or do you think that we are very far from Gen AI as such, and we're still kind of struggling with the basic things and the basic infrastructure in place before we can talk about the latest technologies to be used?
Yeah, I think the case is of the latter.
Hmm.
We are still in a place where there's a huge digital divide, I think is the
Hmm.
term used largely, right?
Yeah.
Ki basic technology itself is not really in place or not really leveraged to its full potential, and other parts of the system are not really working to, uh, uh, you know, as you said, maximize the potential of the technology available. So I think we are very far from AI and how AI can be leveraged, particularly in relation to, I think, classroom and schools and teaching learning. But if we look at the governance side of things, lot of the governance work has been digitized now. Okay, so it varies across states. Like some states are still in a very Excel format, but some states also have their own state portals and dashboards and applications and all of that. And there are some states who are also like exploring the use of AI, but at a very, very rudimentary
Hmm.
stage. So at on the governance side of things, I think we are much closer to leveraging these new technologies such as AI, but not really so much in terms of classroom and teaching and learning. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say if it's not teaching, is there some component of teachers' workload that you see is being helped? Or do you think even teachers need a lot of guidance and we still have long road and a long way to go to for teachers to be able to even use this effectively? So what I'm trying to understand
Hmm.
is it only the learning of the students, or are the teachers even aware? And second, are they being trained to use this?
So I want to clarify your question, okay, Saran. So
Mm-hmm.
are you talking with respect to teachers' capability to use technology for learning, or are you referring to whether technology can support teachers in their other tasks that
So both.
they get involved
So
in?
both. So both. So
Okay.
one is their workload in terms of, additional stuff that they have to do,
Mm-hmm.
which is not teaching, but let's say maintaining certain records, maintaining the governance, etc. And the second is the personalized teaching. So if you could, touch on both of those components, that'll be great.
Okay, sure. So as I shared, I think how technology can be relevant to learning itself is something little, far-sighted right now. So even for teachers, most of the teachers that I meet on the ground don't really see technology as an enabler as such. They see it as okay, this is an add-on that the government has asked us to use or do. So just for compliance purposes, they may show some videos sometimes, or sometimes not even that. Like it's just kept locked up in a room. Most of the boards that smart boards and all that are distributed sometimes don't even get installed. Okay,
Okay.
then coming to their capacity, their capability, skills in terms of using this, as far as I know, most states, once these smart boards and all are distributed, they only do like a one time training, and that training also consists of how to go about navigating the device itself. Okay,
Okay.
not necessarily in terms of how do you integrate technology into your learning, which are the parts where you can maybe just use YouTube or do some activities with children which are interactive in nature in terms of using the smart board and such. So those kinds of things are not really covered in the trainings that they have. A lot of it is like teachers rely on each other to figure it out. So
Hmm.
in a school there are usually teachers who are slightly younger,
Hmm.
and They can kind of pick up these tech related things very easily. Either they drive it, or the senior teachers, if they are open to it, they learn from them, and everybody is using it in some way or the other. But again, as I shared, the use case becomes like you're showing something to the
Yeah.
children for some time, or not necessarily integrating it into your lessons and such. So that is on the learning side of things.
Mhm.
Now, coming to the other tasks, right?
Mhm.
Non-teaching tasks. The major non-teaching task that teachers have is data entry. There's a lot of data entry work that happens in schools, and it is a lot also because they are kind of filling in the same data in multiple platforms. So in a year, they also maintain, like, they are expected to maintain physical registers also, okay, even though things are digitized. So there was this interesting study, I think, in Rajasthan. On there are around 29 to 30 registers that every school is expected to maintain, and most of
Wow.
those data points are also they are expected to also enter it in different platforms or applications or something as well. A lot of So what I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot of data entry that happens, and a lot of time that is expected to spend being spent on this. Right. So the other side of this is also that the platforms where they have to enter data, they are not really so sound. So, for example, there is a SATS state level portal. It's a student attendance tracking system, student achievement tracking system in Karnataka. That's the go-to thing that all state officials, everybody looks at to know the student level statistics in terms of enrollment, attendance, etc. The server of that is so slow that it takes like and they have to use it every day. Every day they
Oh,
have to enter the attendance every day. They have to enter the midday meal data every day. So to do an entry for one student and kind of enter it and upload it, it takes like 15 to 20 minutes. The server is
wow.
slow. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it takes a lot of time to, kind of do these kinds of tasks. So one is the technology itself has to be made more robust. And I'm sure the government has a dedicated tech cell and tech units which can really like improve the quality of what the technology is itself. The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, there is multi platform data entry. So in a year, they have to enter the data in registers. Okay, that is the physical writing. Then they have to enter it in some state level portal or dashboard. If the state doesn't have a state level portal or dashboard, they sometimes use Excel sheets. Now, when I'm saying state level portal or dashboards, it may come from different departments as well.
Yeah.
So education department, tribal welfare department, especially if the schools are located in like, areas where there's a high tribal population, Ministry of Social Justice and Welfare, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So there are different kinds of data that these different ministries collect, but there are also the same kinds of data that are being collected, which leads to a lot of duplication in entry as well. Yeah, so in terms of how maybe something like AI or technology can really like support. So these are not things that are happening yet, but these are
Yeah.
some ideas that I have from the work that I have been doing. One is to kind of integrate these different data domains, and like, if the teacher has already entered it in one platform, it kind of autofills it or something in the other places, and they don't have to do it again and again. The other is in terms of keeping the teacher aside at the next level where the data is getting collated also. There's a lot of duplication, blanks, like the data is that comes in is not necessarily clean, and there aren't enough like human resource available sometimes to do that kind of data cleaning, consolidation, analysis, etc. at the district level or block level. Probably technology, especially AI, can help in doing that kind of, detecting duplicates or missing data or any anomalies in the data as well over a period of time. That is also one level at which tech can play a very important role. The other thing is, a lot of data entry is quantitative data. It's only quantitative data that is collected, and a lot of the data is collected on presence of things because that's the easiest thing for you
Hmm.
to capture. Is there a toilet present? Is there a teacher present, etc.? But they don't necessarily look at, is the toilet usable? A teacher training that has happened, percentage of teachers, a number of teachers that have attended the training is captured, but are the teachers really using it in the classrooms? These are not things that are captured at all, and those are the kinds of things that actually help in decision making. So if there could be like some kind of voice to text way of
Hmm.
capturing data where teachers can give in a lot of qualitative information also. Again, AI can kind of consolidate, synthesize, and give some insights and recommendations. These are areas where I think technology has been underutilized. I don't know of any geographies where these kinds of things are being experimented. Maybe some small pilots are happening because right now the market for AI is also like really huge. So
Oh,
a lot of people are approaching the government with a lot of different ideas as well. And everything happens in a pilot mode. So there could be pilots, but not that I'm aware of. Yeah, these are some things that I know with respect to how teachers are using tech for learning as well as for their non-teaching tasks.
those are great insights. And, a lot of people would not even know how much data entry work and how much manual tasks the teachers have to do on a daily basis. And you said
Yeah.
15 minutes per student. That's like almost all the teaching time gone in
Yeah.
just probably data entry in a day, which is insane.
Many teachers stay back after schools or take
Wow.
back home and such. Yeah, that's the only way to get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that there's a lot of scope for technology to help rather than increase their pain. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a lot of technological innovation to make this
Yeah.
happen, right? All of these things are available. I
Correct.
think you were talking about presence, right? Like just taking a photo is enough to tell a lot now. Like if
Yeah,
a
yeah,
whether
yeah,
a board is being used or not, right? One
yeah,
photo is enough to tell.
yeah, yeah,
No, but these are really, really good inputs and good points.
yeah.
I was just surprised on the 15-20 minute thing, especially in a state like Karnataka. And I think it also brings to your point on the focus on governance and how much it could be improved simply because we are currently so far behind. And I mean, we are talking a lot about Gen AI and all of that, but there is still a lot of the basic infrastructure that needs to be in place. But to turn to something more positive, have you seen any? It can be anecdotal, it could be some example where you did see somebody use it very creatively and you were actually very happy to see that. It could be a teacher, it could be a student who's doing something. Have you seen something like this?
At the classroom level,
Yeah, yeah, at the classroom level or even at a school level, like a teacher trying something creative.
I mean, like in terms of using it with the children itself, you're
Yeah,
talking.
yeah,
Yeah. Using it creatively. I mean, I can't immediately think of something that I have seen, but I know of like not from like personal experience, but I know of ways in which teachers do use like a single mobile phone very creatively. They like connect it to speakers
yeah. Right.
and use it for phonics instruction. That is, I think, a interesting way in which to maximize the use of just having one device
One
and you're
device.
still able to like teach something in the classroom. Teachers also use it like for those functions which don't necessarily require like internet and such as well, right? Like go outside and take pictures of three different kinds of leaves or something like that. Like
Right.
using other parts of the phone like camera, clock, calculator, these kinds of things to do interesting things with the children. But again, that is possible. Those kinds of things have been possible when the classroom size has been really, really small,
Yeah.
like some 15 to 20 students or something. And that's a very rare case kind of scenario. Now, in general, what I have seen when I speak to teachers is teachers are very averse to actually using these devices. First of all, it's usually their personal mobile phone, unless like someone has distributed smartphones or tabs, and this may not necessarily be the government. A lot of schools get these kinds of devices also through CSR
Right.
or even these other tech giants like this Byju's and Khan Academy. They also do like some pro bono stuff and do some distribution of tabs and things like that. So mobile phone distribution has been very limited. So it's their personal phone, so they're very apprehensive to really use it. Then there's a lot of mindset level issues also. Children should not be exposed to like technology as such in that age. They should only have access to phones once they have become 18 years of age, because like if I give it to them, what if they do different things with it and
Right.
such. There are those kinds of fears also that
Mm.
make them, and this is not just teachers, even in the households, parents are not willing to give devices to children, say for homework, because they feel like they should not be exposed to technology as such. So those kinds of inhibitions also kind of reduce the ways in which, say, a simple device like a phone is being used in the classroom.
So, Deepa, shifting on to students themselves, you said that the parents and teachers both are not very comfortable giving the device in the hands of children. So, is it fair to say that their exposure to technology and therefore personalized learning and the possibility of learning with the help of, let's say, a ChatGPT or a Gemini is limited because their access to this device is limited? Or do you think that kids still have found ways to use and learn using this technology more creatively?
See, I think that it's difficult for me to generalize and say with respect to this. So there was this, I'll tell you something that I know which is more data oriented, and then I'll try to kind of answer
Sure.
your question as well. Okay. So, ASER report, I think both of you are
Yeah.
familiar with, right? Yeah. So, ASER 2023 report focused on the age group of 14 to 18 years on multiple things. And I think digital education or digital literacy was one of the domains that they were focusing on. In the youth, and 14 to 18, as you can tell, is like the youth category. So the youth have more access to a smartphone, right? Either they have their own or they have access to it from their parents, usually their fathers or something like that. And again, in that, there is a divide, like boys can easily access it versus girls because people are scared that girls will talk to boys and run away or something. So a large percentage of youth have access. Now, how they go about using it is what is interesting in that study, right? So they know they use it mainly for social media. They use it for entertainment videos and such. They can do like simple calculator, setting alarm kind of tasks as well, but they don't really use it in a very meaningful manner. Now, if I have to think of this and think back to like, elementary school student, I could possibly say that again they don't get the right guidance either from school or from their parents in terms of how to go about using it, right? Like from personal experience, I have seen school children sitting and looking at videos or social media and all of that only on the phone. This is like very one off here and there experiences, okay? So that's also why I said I don't want to generalize. So one is, I don't think at one level access is limited to younger kids because of this mindset level issue. The other is that when they do have access, they are not really guided in terms of how they should be using it, what they should be using it for. Or they don't necessarily have a lot of restrictions also in terms of what they can use it for as well, right? Um, so yeah, can you repeat your question once again? You went on some kind of a loop.
No, what you were on the right track.
Huh.
What I really wanted to understand was, do students have access to this technology? For example, are they aware there's something that can help them with their homework, for example, or it can help them study something or learn something? Even for example, YouTube, are they using these for education purposes, or do they not have access to the devices itself?
Yeah. The meaningful use is not happening, like
Yeah.
not necessarily for learning, but it is used for various purposes. But that's also a gap of schools not really guiding them around it, or
Yeah.
schools not necessarily guiding parents also around it. It's not necessary that schools have to do some kind of coaching training of children itself. They can
Yeah.
also engage with parents in terms of one, maybe working on those mindset level things as well, that you can give your devices to children. But maybe you sit with them and you see what they're doing with it. And maybe it's during some fixed 1 hour when they're doing their homework or something like that. So I think these are some missing things which are there. As a result of this national education policy, a few things that have come up in the space of digital literacy, digital learning, is there are some chapters and or concepts introduced right from I think grade 3 onwards now in the new textbooks, which talk about AI, which talk about like technology. Not really, it doesn't really go into how to use AI, but about the presence of it and what it means and such. That's it.
Okay.
Again, so the curriculum can go a +1 to really talking about how to use it as well. So that's currently not there.
And this is an interesting contrast because in our previous episode, we've been talking about, teachers being worried about too much use of AI.
Yeah.
And here, I think there are places where there is potential, but obviously the access is limited and it's a completely different problem that
Yeah,
we are dealing with.
yeah.
Yeah.
Digital divide is real. Talking to you, we feel that, whatever we discussed so far was how do we really limit and make sure that they use it correctly. Now we're talking about how do we really make them use it so that they can, for better learning and better
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but how do you foresee this? Like, do you think, especially with these models getting better at non-English, right, in
Mm.
local languages, do you foresee this divide getting closer, or are you worried about it being actually further apart? Because, like, obviously the paid ones are much better and all of those things.
Both are possible right now. I think it largely depends on the larger design of it. Right now, there are a lot of private solutions present, but these are fragmented in nature and kind of exacerbate the digital divide. When it's a private solution, someone has to purchase it, either the government or a privately run school that can afford it. And what ends up happening is that the solutions are not necessarily equitably distributed. And markets are pushing for their agenda. We don't necessarily know whether these solutions or these devices actually enable learning. If the government takes ownership to set up and design a digital public infrastructure, which is end to end, starting with how it is integrated into its own inputs, such as the curriculum and pedagogy, all the way to using it for closing the feedback loops for better governance, better decision making, um, a public infrastructure such as this may be better suited to address the digital divide and make the most out of leveraging technology and AI for better outcomes at the student level. Right now, there are a lot of private solutions and they don't necessarily speak with each other. So the government has can also play the role of an orchestrator. It has to orchestrate how markets participate in this. It can commission solutions, it can pilot them, it can study their effects, it can co-create solutions with the markets as well, right? It can partner meaningfully with them. It can also kind of regulate or monitor the use and adoption of these kinds of solutions, because it's only the government that can enable wide scale equitable adoption. So perhaps it can be in meaningful collaboration with markets and maybe take care more of the training and support at the ground level rather than designing the solution in itself.
Yeah, and the problem also is that every state does it differently. There's a national education policy, but then there is different state boards, there's different education boards, and everybody does it differently. Everybody has a different way of looking at it. So it's very difficult to see overall how the technology can play out. So, do you see a role of NGOs and non-profits in, in some of this that you think can help to bridge this divide, bridge this gap? For example, Asar is very active in doing these surveys and
Hmm.
checking whether the results of the interventions. So, what do you think? What is your view on the role of the non-profits in this?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, a lot of nonprofits have moved into and tried to embrace this whole digital revolution, if I can call it, that's happening with AI and everything. Mostly the innovations have been tried in the governance space, but I know some applications which are very student centric as well. One of it is Karadipath. I think Google also has something called Bolo app. Again, I know Google is not a non-profit. It's something which does this tech translation into different languages, and I've seen like some classrooms using it. Karadipath is a very popular one that it's by. Yeah, I think that's the name of the NGO also, Karadipath itself. They have very interesting and very relevant English learning application. It's a mobile application, but present in many geographies. Again, it's not there at scale, but in pilots or in smaller clusters of schools. It's there in Bangalore also in Anikal block. All the schools in the block have used Karadipath for teachers use Karadipath for teaching and learning English. Then there are parental engagement programs like the learning at home side of things. So I think we looked a lot at in the school application, but there are a lot of non-profits or civil societies that also work along with parents or only with parents and such. Pratham Central Square Foundation, Rocket Learning, these are some of which I'm aware of, which have really good parental engagement programs. Basically, these are short videos or activities that are sent by schools to parents that parents can do with their children at home. And they don't really require a high level of literacy. A lot of it is audiovisual. So it doesn't really require a lot of a high level of literacy, and it's in the colloquial languages that parents can understand. So that is something that has been tried as well. On the governance side of things, my organization, Mantra for Change, has been working on doing this chatbot kind of a thing within WhatsApp, where the primary objective is to nudge the stakeholders. So we roll out different programs, and every stakeholder in the system has a particular action or a practice that they have to do. Now, we collect data, and based on the data, there are nudges that are sent through WhatsApp to maybe defaulters, or even recognizing some people who are doing those actions consistently and telling them, like, you are here on the leaderboard or something, right? And for all this, AI is being used. We are also using AI for not just our organization, many other organizations also that I know of, using AI for any kind of pattern detection in the data collection that we do, and also feeding back the data that is captured back to the stakeholders in some form or shape, right? I think that's a very huge missing link which is there in data governance, where a lot of data is collected but nothing goes back to the stakeholders. So imagine like a teacher who is filling in, say, some 29 registers and that much worth of data on different platforms, but nothing comes back to them in terms of what they should improve or what they are doing well and such. So we are also working on how can that data be fed back to particular stakeholders. Again, we are using WhatsApp and I think some extension of WhatsApp, like a chatbot version of it. We also have, there are these other kinds of chatbots we have developed which do this voice to text capture of qualitative information. So earlier I spoke about how qualitative information is not something that's captured so much, right? So this is something, the bot that kind of helps. It's used with parents as well as like teachers, school leaders, etc. It's a list of some 8 to 10 qualitative questions that these stakeholders can respond to, and the data is synthesized in the analyzed and synthesized in the back end for us as a dashboard with like very key insights and such. So yeah, so these are different ways in which I think nonprofits are innovating and trying to leverage the available technology. There are very specific market players also that particularly target working with CSOs or nonprofits on improving these kinds of data collection processes or decision making processes using technology.
Those are great insights, and good to know that at least the data collection and the admin part of it, and making sure that the data is captured and the relevant inputs are taken and processed.
Yeah, these are great insights. And I think your point primarily was that there are NGOs and private players doing this, but governments have to start taking a lead, right?
Yeah.
To actually make it happen and to scale it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is that one thing you think that the government should definitely start off with, right? Like that one low hanging fruit or something that is all available, but governments are not picking up.
And Deepa, put your Takshashila hat on. What do you think as a policy student that there should be something that should be done immediately?
I will share from the lens of using or leveraging technology for governance. Okay. I think one thing is that the government should really think about where is it that it is allocating the budget. Most of the ICT, information and communication technology budget, is towards very student oriented inputs. It could be tabs, it could be these smart boards, it could be some kind of training for teachers around using these in the classroom and such as well. Not so much is invested in terms of actually leveraging all the other, like you said, Karthik, all these options which are present, right? So I think
Right.
where is the resource allocation happening? And the thing is, after investing so much in smart boards and such, is it really leading to improved learning? Not really. Actually, there are studies that say that it's not really adding so much value and improving the learning exponentially. So it's worth taking a pause and thinking about, are you investing it in the right places? So I think that is one thing that government should definitely think about. One more thing, if I may add, would be to, particularly in the space of what this data capture, data collection, data governance, would be to make it more outcome linked. Right now, most of the data collected is all the of all the activities and outputs of the government, and not necessarily in terms of what is it changing for children, teachers, or other stakeholders in the system. So if the data collection itself becomes more outcome based, then one, I think the kinds of data being collected itself will reduce significantly, and it'll make the data that is being collected more useful and lean. We'll have like a lean data collection system coming in as well. So I think these are two things that the government should, or education departments particularly, should definitely think about.
Thank you so much, Deepa. That was really, really helpful and very useful conversation. We are talking about AI usage of ChatGPT and Gemini, while the students on the ground and the teachers on the ground are struggling with the basic internet connectivity. So that does open our eyes towards a lot of actual ground reality. So thank you so much for bringing in that perspective, Deepa.
Yeah, of course. I think the fundamental thing is to look at technology in relation to other parts of the system, which is like highly missing. It's seen as a standalone thing that's expected to solve a lot of problems, whereas it has to work in tandem with so many other things. And that system has to work as a whole for us to be able to achieve those kinds of outcomes that we want.
Yeah, great conversation, Deepa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Deepa.
Thank you for tuning into Prompt India.
We will be back soon with another episode. Until then, take care.